June 2006. Serbia and Montenegro walk out at the World Cup in Germany. They have a badge, they have an anthem, they have a country. Except they don't, not really. Montenegro voted for independence 3 weeks earlier. The country on their shirts has already ceased to exist. They just haven't told the players yet. That is one of 7 nations on this list. A team that won one of the most famous upsets in World Cup history, then vanished. A player whose most famous moment was misunderstood by everyone who watched it. And one golden generation so loaded with talent that people still argue about what they could have won if history had not torn their country apart first. International football is built on one assumption, that the country on the badge is permanent. It is not. War, reunification, revolution, political collapse, all of it has deleted national teams from the map while tournaments were still being played. This is not a list of bad teams. It is a record of history eating football alive. Before we get to the chaos, we need to talk about how good this team actually was. Serbia and Montenegro finished above Spain in their World Cup qualifying group. Not level with Spain, above them. And across the entire qualifying campaign, they conceded exactly one goal. One goal. In international football, that is not normal. That is the kind of defensive record that makes other coaches quietly nervous. So when Germany 2006 arrived, this was a team people genuinely respected. But here is where the timeline becomes almost impossible to sit with. Montenegro held its independence vote in May 2006. The World Cup started in June 2006. These players had qualified for one country and arrived representing a different political reality. The badge on their chest was already a relic before the first whistle. And then Argentina handed them a 6-0, not just a defeat, a dismantling so complete it felt like history finishing a sentence. After the tournament, Serbia and Montenegro formally split into 2 separate football associations. That 2006 World Cup was the first and last appearance that nation ever made. The next story involves a team where losing too badly reportedly had personal consequences for the players. Because the political pressure we just described was loud but distant, what comes next was allegedly aimed directly at the men on the pitch. The 1974 World Cup was hosted by West Germany, and the draw produced something almost fictional. East and West Germany were placed in the same group and had to actually play each other. West Germany came in loaded, Beckenbauer commanding from defense, Gerd Müller lurking up front. They were not just favorites for the group, many expected them to win the entire tournament. East Germany had no such narrative. They were underdogs, broadly expected to make up the numbers. Then Jürgen Sparwasser scored. The other Germany had just beaten the host. This was not merely a football result, it was political theater played out in boots. Across a physically divided nation, one half had just proven something to the other. The Eastern system had walked into the Western showpiece and won. Now here is the ironic twist that both sides somehow got to keep. West Germany went on to win the entire tournament, lifting the trophy on home soil. So East Germany won the battle, West Germany won the war, and football gave both sides a story. Then came reunification in 1990, and the East German team was simply absorbed into a unified Germany. No collapse, no drama. Just a jersey that quietly stopped being worn one day. That quiet ending matters because ghost nations do not always disappear through violence or war. Sometimes they disappear through hope, and something is still lost. Czechoslovakia was never the loudest team at a World Cup, but they were never comfortable opponents either. Technically disciplined, tactically smart, the kind of side that made bigger nations work for everything. They had history in the tournament, a reputation, a football identity built across decades. Then 1993 arrived, and politics moved faster than any qualifying campaign. The Velvet Divorce, Czechoslovakia split into the Czech Republic and Slovakia without a single shot fired. orderly, peaceful, internationally praised as a model of civilized political separation. But on a football level, the consequences were identical to every other dissolution in this video. Misunderstanding. Players who had built years of tactical chemistry suddenly wore different badges. You cannot split a dressing room the way you split a parliament. The Czech Republic went on to reach the 1996 European Championship final, a serious, memorable run. Slovakia built its own identity, qualified for tournaments, carved its own path. Both nations moved forward, both built something real. But the original Czechoslovakia team became a shared memory that neither successor nation fully owns. It sits in between them, not quite Czech, not quite Slovak, belonging entirely to a country that no longer exists. Ghost nation status is not reserved for war, revolution, or dramatic collapse. Sometimes all it takes is a peaceful agreement signed in an office somewhere. The badge disappears just the same. Most people who have seen this clip think they know exactly what happened. They are wrong. In 1974, Zaire became the first sub-Saharan African nation to qualify for the World Cup. That alone should have been the headline, a whole region finally getting its moment. African football had been systematically ignored by global governance for decades. Zaire arrived in West Germany, carrying the weight of that entire ignored history. Then came the moment everyone remembers. Brazil had a free kick. The wall was set. The referee stepped back. And Zaire defender Mwepu Ilunga sprinted out of the wall and booted the ball away, before Brazil even took the kick. For decades, the lazy version dominated. He didn't understand the rules. The real story is darker, and honestly far more human than that. The players were reportedly under severe pressure from the Mobutu regime back home. There were claims of threats tied to further heavy defeats. When Ilunga ran out and kicked that ball, it may have been frustration, protest, or panic. A man trapped inside a political machine using football as state propaganda. 0 goals scored, 14 conceded. Every statistic weaponized against them for 50 years. But this was not a bad team. This was a pioneering team under conditions most players never face. In 1974, Mobutu's regime fell, and Zaire became the Democratic Republic of the Congo. That 1974 squad was permanently archived under a name that no longer exists. And if Zaire shows us what happens when a government weaponizes a team, the Soviet Union shows us what happens when the government itself simply ceases to exist. The Soviet Union wasn't just a football team, it was a system, a centralized pipeline, pulling talent from a territory spanning 11 time zones. When it worked, it produced something genuinely different from anything Western European football built. Lev Yashin, the Black Spider, still the benchmark for every goalkeeper argument ever had. He didn't just save shots, he controlled games from the back like a field commander. The USSR reached European Championship finals. They had tactical identity, genuine tactical identity, disciplined, intense, and stylistically distinct in ways neutral fans actually respected. But here's the thing about systems that enormous. When they break, they don't fade gradually, they fracture. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and one national team became over a dozen football futures simultaneously. Russia as primary successor, Ukraine, Georgia, Belarus, the Baltic states, all independent overnight. Talent pools that once fed one crest were suddenly redistributed across newly drawn borders, and the players inside that system faced something no tactics board prepares you for. Growing up wearing one badge and suddenly needing to choose a new allegiance. Not always simple, not always emotionally clean, sometimes genuinely painful. The Soviet Union's final World Cup was 1990. There was no farewell, no ceremony, no closing chapter, just a tournament that quietly turned out to be the last one. The book closed mid-sentence. This one sounds made up. It genuinely sounds made up until you check it twice. After World War II, Germany was reshaped in ways most football fans have never been taught. Saarland, a small border region, briefly existed as a separate political entity, and for a short window in the 1950s, it had its own international football team. It competed in World Cup qualifying as an independent football nation, not a metaphor, not an unofficial match, actual competitive World Cup qualification. It didn't last long. Eventually, Saarland was reintegrated into West Germany and the team dissolved. No war, no dramatic collapse, just quiet absorption into something bigger. And that's exactly why this case matters for everything we've been building, because ghost nations don't all die the same way. Some collapse violently, some split along political fault lines, some merge peacefully into something new, some barely leave a clear record behind. Saarland is that last category, a football nation that existed just long enough to be real. And it proves something important. The map of international football has always been more unstable than fans assume. Every badge feels permanent until the day it isn't. Now we arrive at the final case, the one where the talent was real, the potential was genuinely extraordinary, and the loss was the most painful of all. This one doesn't just belong to football history. It belongs to the question of what might have been. Let's talk about the team that never got to find out how good it actually was. Yugoslavia, in the late 80s and early 90s, had something genuinely frightening. Dragan Stojkovic, a midfielder who could slow a game down or accelerate it at will. Dejan Savicevic, unpredictable in a way that no tactical preparation could fully contain. Robert Prosinečki, technically precise, creative under pressure, dangerous in spaces that shouldn't exist. This wasn't a team built on hope. People genuinely believed they could win a major tournament. Then the country started breaking apart. Not cleanly, in layers. Players who had trained together, laughed together, built chemistry over years, suddenly wore different badges. Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, 6 nations from one football identity. Each inherited fragments of something that, unified, might have been extraordinary. And here's the painful proof that the talent was real. Croatia reached a World Cup final in 2018. That wasn't luck. That was the same player pool, just wearing a different shirt. But imagine that talent concentrated into one squad, rather than scattered across 6 competing nations. Nobody can answer that question cleanly. And that's exactly the point. Yugoslavia's football didn't disappear. It multiplied into something the world could still see, but the unified dream stayed frozen. That is a different kind of loss than deletion. Every team in this video walked onto a World Cup pitch, representing something already ending. Serbia and Montenegro's qualifying record, 1 goal conceded, meant almost nothing 4 weeks later. Alunga's boot connecting with that ball carried an entire country's panic inside one desperate act. Sparwasser's goal landed in a stadium that was supposed to belong to the other Germany. Yashin's black jersey represented a system so vast that a generation never saw it play again. Yugoslavia's players trained together for the last time without knowing that's what it was. In every single case, the badge felt permanent. It was not. It never was. And that's what international football actually is, underneath the tactics and the trophies. It's not a record of sport, it's a record of moments when nations needed to prove they existed. When a country steps onto that pitch, they're not just representing a squad, they're representing a moment in history that might not last much longer. Some of these teams only got one chance to do that, one tournament, one group stage, sometimes one single match, and then the map changed and the badge disappeared without asking anyone's permission. So next time you watch a World Cup, look at the flag, really look at it. If you watched old World Cup clips now, you probably ask, who won? But maybe the better question is something else entirely. What country was that at that exact moment? Because sometimes, the most important part of football history isn't the trophy, it's